Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, your weekly developer podcast, or maybe Frank's machine works because he decided to install a bunch of betas. How's that going, Frank?
The betas are wonderful. I haven't had one issue aside from the 45 minutes we've wasted playing with my microphone trying to record this podcast. Aside from that, it's been great. I recommend everyone upgrade.
Listen, some of the biggest social media networks in the world can't get audio things to work. So I understand the complications of two people trying to record a podcast. It's nearly impossible. All right, let's get into it, Frank. I got 3 topics.
3 topics? I did my homework for 1 topic, so I hope to goodness my topic's in here because I printed things out, James. I highlighted.
Oh my gosh.
So we'll see what your topics are. I love being in suspense. We're all in suspense. Wow. What do you got?
So here's another thing. So people of the podcast, please subscribe at youtube.com/mergeconflict.fun. You can go on Patreon, blah, blah, blah. I'll links in the show notes. Frank and I don't do prep. We don't talk anymore. We only talk on this podcast and our Patreon feed. And I just assume that Frank doesn't prepare anymore. So I always come with random topics. I open up a note and I go, okay, notepad, like, here we go. Frank's never going to have anything, but he's got something today. So you might get a bonus topic. Let's get into it. Xamarin in 2025, Frank. It's happening.
What did I miss a year? What happened?
It's back, baby. Okay.
Explain yourself, James, because you just said Xamarin, I believe, not MAUI. I believe that's the word you just said.
No, Xamarin in 2025, baby. Okay, so somebody asked me, I was at VS Live last week. We recorded live in the green ether, if you remember.
Okay.
The purple ether, you remember?
The purple, much better, yeah. The green would not compliment you.
No, it could be green screen. That would have been pretty cool. With lots of hand emotion things. So somebody asked me, they said, hey, listen, I installed my Xamarin app, and I know that we're end of life. There's no official support, but I also know that it is true that the Xamarin team and now the .NET MAUI team, made it possible to compile your Android app and target API 34. No bindings, but you can target it. And they also made it so you can compile against Xcode, 15.4, and the latest SDK. You don't get the stuff, but it's in there. And they said, hey, how long can I just keep building and shipping? Like, and I know they're like, I know it really says migrate and like it says no support, but hey, how long? So what would your answer be if I said, hey, Frank, how long can I just keep going? Just keep going at it?
Sadly, it's up to Apple. We're because we just did a whole episode on our basic CI/CD setups. You set yourself up a CI/CD, you lock in those version numbers, man. You just lock them in. You have a very specific Xamarin version. You have a specific Xcode version, whichever ones you get working, and you leave that machine pumping out builds for the rest of eternity. The problem is, at some point, Apple's not going to allow you to use that version of Xcode to upload binaries for the App Store. That's the App Store. If you're just making executables, you do you live on, because as long as you keep up with their security model, you'll be fine. But if you want to be on the store, they have certain SDK requirements. Those SDKs only ship with versions of Xcode. Therefore, it's a fundamentally an Xcode requirement. Sadly, Xcode is now tied to the operating system. So now you're tied to an operating system version. Software.
Yeah.
So the answer is, if we're lucky, 3-4 years. If we're not lucky, 1 year. It's really in Apple's court, sadly.
Yeah, it's definitely true. So there's the and that becomes the next question. Are you shipping to the App Store or are you shipping internally? Right. The simple answer for if you're shipping internally is as long as the operating system doesn't break your app, right?
Yeah.
So, and that could happen.
Then,
so
then you can work around it.
You could link out things. You could remove some APIs that you were using. So for example, if you were building something and they remove an API and it's not linked out, it could crash your app. So you might be able to get around that by linking it out, unless they fundamentally change something that like that they don't. They really don't. They
No.
did like once, I think, ever, like 32 to 64-bit conversion.
Yeah, that was a big deal, obviously. That was an architecture change. And there have been sub-architecture changes, but they always support the old architectures too.
Yeah.
Um, the, the ugly things are when they they play around with private APIs sometimes. And so an API that's deprecated, they might make private. And in that
Yeah.
case, like you said, you can link it out. There's other nasty things you can do because in the end, a Xamarin app is just a native executable. So you
Yeah.
can do all sorts of nasty things to it to make it version compatible. Look, I'm not promoting this or anything, but our architecture hasn't really changed. The ABI hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
If there's an executable with one SDK version in it and some program changes that SDK version to a higher number and then Apple accepts it, fair game as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not
Yeah.
promoting that.
No, definitely wouldn't promote that. This is not an officially sanctioned Microsoft or Frank Kruger LLC,
Or
Kruger
Apple.
Systems LLC, or Apple endorsed system. The other thing, so that's the easy one. Same thing with Android. Like, hey, as long as your app runs, you can keep building it. There's not really an issue.
Yeah.
But the problem is going to the App Store. So I just ran into the situation where by the end of August, you have to target SDK 34.
Yeah.
Now, the Xamarin stuff supports it. So I just shipped updates to my remaining apps, which I have a migration branch, but I'm just too lazy to test. I just don't have time.
Yeah.
So I just bought myself another year over there on Android. I just shipped it. Everything's working great. Just tested out. Just went for a spin on the bike. It's great. So that's easy peasy to the App Store. The difference is next August, I assume, you will have to compile against API 35. And at that point, you're going to run into problems at that.
So
And the same thing is true for iOS. Yeah. Frank's got a question.
You're only giving it 1 year on the Android side. You really think they're going to require 35 next year?
They have new every year so last year in August, I had to update all my apps and I get to compile against API 33 every year. Frank, they do the bump. That's a new requirement because they want to purge old apps.
I like how a group of 400 developers are making their lives easier by making 400,000 developers' lives harder. I'm glad they made that engineering trade-off.
Well, the other problem that you have is that on Android, not only do they require an API bump, but if you're doing in-app purchases and subscriptions, they require a specific version of the billing library. And yes, folks, you are welcome because the final update to the in-app billing plugin before it targeted only .NET 8 has the final update that targets Android billing library 6.0, which is required as of this month as well, or September or something like that. So you're good for another year. And then you really got to migrate because at that point, those billing libraries from the .NET team are targeting .NET 8. So like I can't even give you backwards compatible packages for Android billing 7.0. It doesn't exist. Now in iOS, you said 1 to 5 years. However, Frank, in April this year, Apple required you to compile against Xcode 15, which has us assuming that you would have to compile against Xcode 16.
I don't know. I don't think Apple's that predictable. No, I think I'm sure I'll be proven wrong because honestly, it feels 50-50 to me at this point. But I feel like they don't like to break. They have a bad reputation for not caring about backwards compatibility. We talk about it all the time. Apple wants you using the latest SDK, latest language versions, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they don't love breaking old apps and things like that. So my guess is this was a weird Vision OS related thing, honestly.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think we're going to get a couple of years out of this SDK. I'm 50-50 on whether I'm right or wrong. My gut feel. Okay. Right. Well, we'll find out.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, I want to put this in the books for all of our listeners. In April of 2023, Apple required Xcode 14.1, and in April of 2024, Apple required Xcode 15. This has to assume that they follow a pattern. I'm just saying, Brent Krueger. So we'll see.
Yeah. So maybe we should port our apps to MAUI.
Yes. Anyways, that's. But if you're internal, your internal app, live your life.
And also, look through my GitHub. There's an app that can do binary modifications and change any version number to any other version number. So just saying, if your executable is built with the wrong SDK, it's kind of easy to fix.
It's true. We ran into that problem. There was some weird test flight thing where like the info P list needed some information. You could like end up injecting it like to build script, and then it's like cool. It's really just metadata.
It's all metadata.
It's really just, it's really
these
stupid.
chips haven't changed. Like that's the frustrating part. Like these chips haven't changed. The ABI hasn't changed. The Swift ABI used to change. It don't anymore.
Yes,
we're in a really stable place.
Yes. Okay. I want to talk about Patreon and in-app billing purchases. While we're talking about in-app purchases, we just put out a brand new video and audio update for our Patreon subscribers. Patreon.com/mergeconflict.fm. You can go ahead and subscribe. You give exclusive early podcasts and bonus stuff.
Good job.
So Apple has decided that they have all these new regulations around, selling stuff in the App Store, outside of the App Store, the EU, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Yeah. For my apps, I don't care. I'm not big enough. I'm just all into the Apple ecosystem. Boom. Patreon, they have an iOS app. You can purchase subscriptions and support us through that app. However, starting in November, Apple will start to take a cut of those purchases. And now I'm assuming this is because there's new regulations and you can buy it outside the App Store and you can link out sort it, blah, a whole bunch of shenanigans. Apple will take 30% cut, which means that Patreon will now make less than Apple does if you support us. However, to our Patreon supporters, we will be covering the cost. Like we're going to keep the prices the same in the app. We're covering the costs to you, the consumer of the podcast, because also like, it doesn't, it's fine for us, obviously, but it's kind of a weird situation that I feel like the App Store is so weird now with these regulations. Am I wrong? What's going on, Frank?
You're absolutely right. Someone on Mastodon posted something great. They're like, I liked Apple when they made hardware, not when they were soul-sucking services company. Anyway, Patreon's been on the App Store for 10 years, and Apple has not been charging them normally on the App Store. If you sell digital goods, Apple takes 30% cut. Our Patreon donations, digital goods, do we give? I guess there's an exchange, but I don't know. This is lawyer stuff. This is store stuff. This is market stuff. I hate all of it. I think Apple is being very greedy here. They make lots of money on the App Store. It's a big money machine for them. Asking for 30%. Look, people on Patreon are not rich. Okay, I'm just going to say that. Maybe there's a few. There's the top performers. You can go look on Patreon. You can see who's making the big bucks. But the most of the people on Patreon, they're just scraping by. And what happened to Apple, the cool little company helping little artists out there? Like, Patreon is the little artist company. And they're like, no, we're going to take 30% from you off all that stuff. So I think we made a good decision. We're just going to cover Apple's terrible 30% cut if you buy through the app. I do request that you just use the website. Don't give Apple their blood money. But yeah, I don't think this is a good trend. I hope Apple rethinks their position on this. The really nasty part is the whole, they weren't doing this last year. Why weren't they charging for it last year or 2 years ago? This seems very vindictive. Vindictive. There's
some weird.
It seems greedy.
Stuff.
I'm just going to say that word. That's good enough.
It seems weird. I mean, even outside of this, what is your feelings on the whole buy in the App Store versus not buy in the App Store? Because now, for example, they will allow you to link to a website where you could subscribe, but you can't have tracking stuff. You can't automatically log the user in. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then they also want some weird cut of something. I don't know. What's your general thoughts here?
they want a cut of every bit of money that flows through the iPhone.
Mhm.
It's that, or any of their hardware, which I don't agree with. Just because I bought your hardware doesn't entitle you to a cut of every single thing I do with that piece of hardware. That maybe is the future where we're being nickel and dimed everywhere. We're not paying lump sums anymore, but we're not living in that world. I don't see why, because I use this hardware, there's only one way for me to put apps on that hardware from other people,
Yeah.
and you're going to force this stuff. I've never been a big fan of the 30% digital goods tax, and neither is any other business. I mean, no one's ever said it's worth it to me or Apple's giving me something I couldn't get otherwise, because I don't know, man. That just like, I never say this, but thank goodness for the EU giving them some pressure, because it seems like our government isn't giving them any pressure.
Yeah. It's a strange one. And I mean, we've talked about the praises as an app developer about how we love distributing our applications through the App Store. Like, I'll say
The
that
app.
the app, I mean, I also, by the way, love in-app purchase stuff. Like, it does make it easy. I don't have to worry about billing.
Hmm.
I don't have to worry about online accounts. I have to do all this stuff.
Hmm.
Like, a lot of people do that. Obviously, if you're Patreon or you're Netflix or you're, some other company, like, you need to link accounts and you do all this stuff and you have a bunch of logic or third-party providers. It's like really complicated, right? For the small indie developer, it makes it really easy to start getting. It's kind of like the Wix or what's that other thing that everyone uses?
Well,
Shopify. It's the Shopify,
yeah,
right? I got an app and give me the in-app billing, and now they're taking a cut. Okay, if they land, great.
PayPal. It's a new
PayPal,
version
right?
of
Yeah.
PayPal. It's all of these things. Yeah, I appreciate that too, but that was a problem 10 years ago.
Mm,
I think the App Store is still good for getting my app out there. If someone wants an app, they go to the App Store, they search the App Store, hopefully they find my app. That's a model. We're kind of forced into it because that's the only way you can put an app on the phone. But when it comes to digital goods, things have changed quite a bit.
yeah.
There's Stripe. PayPal has improved slightly. There's ways to Venmo things. You go to a farmer's market now, it's all Venmo and all these weird
Yeah.
apps and things like that. For goodness sake, Apple has this thing called Apple Pay, which makes accepting secure online payments from Apple customers super easy on a website and very trustworthy on that website. So if you're running an e-commerce site, you've probably integrated Apple Pay because, I don't know, I love it because I trust it. And so Apple's saying they have to charge 30% on digital goods through the App Store. It contradicts the whole Apple Pay thing, because
Yeah.
here's a secure payment system, here's a secure payment system. Why does one cost 30% and the other costs nothing?
It is odd to think that you could have the same web app where you have a buy subscription button that charges, obviously you would get like a 3% Stripe fee or whatever for credit card, versus do the same subscription, it's a 30% fee. Obviously, they're distributing your app, they're handling the bandwidth, the downloads of your app, storage, all this stuff, right? And there's bajillions of people and so much
Apps.
bandwidth and all this stuff.
Separate out apps and digital goods, though.
I
Digital goods
know
are often just GUID.
it is it no you're no I think that's a great perspective. I totally agree. You are correct. You gotta keep me in check, Frank. You gotta keep me in Frank check, because you're right, because anyone could release just a free app 100% for free, no
Mhm.
in-app subscriptions, no anything, and they could have a 18 gig download in your little
Yeah.
tiny app that's 5 megabytes. You know what I mean? Like, there, you could be a completely free
Yeah.
game. It could have an
Uh-huh.
LM. It could be all this stuff, and they're just paying their same $100 Apple developer account. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Free hosting.
So
It's great.
free
Here's my
hosting.
here's my
Yeah.
8 gig LLM that only works
If
on
people
one kind of
if
Mac
people
hardware.
have thoughts on this stuff in general, I know it's not just Apple. There's other
Yeah.
places to distribute apps. There's
Everyone's doing
all
it.
everyone's doing stuff, right? But Apple's in the hot seat right now. So let us know. Go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/@mergeconflict.fm, which, by the way, I can't imagine the bandwidth and
Oh
storage
gosh.
fees for YouTube. I'm just saying. Talk about distributing stuff. All right, last one we got here. I call this the Mega dotnet MAUI update of 2024.
Every time you do this, I'm like, did I miss a blog post? What happened? What did I miss, James? I am behind. I'm caught up on some MAUI stuff, but I wasn't caught up on the Mega update. I'm ready for a Mega update.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited, Frank Kruger. Okay, so it's a Tuesday. Frank, we're recording on Tuesday. Do you know what Tuesday it is?
Patch Tuesday.
Patch Tuesday is the second Tuesday, which means also .NET 9 Preview 7 has dropped. Okay, this is a mega. Now we're real close to RC, baby, which means that they got to get them features in before go live. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, look at
I'm just saying, you want your bonus or not? You got to get that feature.
So I collaborate super close with the engineering team and the PM team, and they put together these amazing release notes, and I get the honor and the privilege of doing the announcement post on discussion. I have zero to do with anything. All right. My name is just there just because I'm doing merges and stuff like that. This is a chunky release, but we're going to skip over libraries and runtime and SDK and C# and ASP.NET Core. I want to get to the MAUI bits, baby. All right, Frank. There are chunky goodness in here. Hybrid web view in the box. In the box, baby. That's right. We got a Blazor web view. We got a hybrid web view. We got a normal web view. Do you need a web view? We got web views.
Okay, I'll admit I know nothing about the hybrid web view. I do know a little bit about the Blazor web view. That one's a little self-explanatory. You got a Blazor app, you just bloop, Blazor it. What's the hybrid for?
Hybrid web view enables you to embed any HTML, JavaScript, or CSS directly into your application and load it up. So you can add React content, Angular content, Vue content directly into your application inside there. And it's a better API because it enables you to have a two-way communication channel between JavaScript and C# and C# and JavaScript. There's a whole API layer between it. You know, obviously the web view can kind of do that, but this is a standardized API, which is nice.
As someone who has written a lot of janky JavaScript talkie code for going from app to the web, back to the app, back to the web, callbacks, timers. I've done it all. I've done the worst of it. Thank goodness for this. Good. Because you don't want to write that code. It's terrible. It's the worst code. And I've done it a few times. And every time I'm like, I should write a control for this. So I'm glad someone wrote a control for that.
Yeah. It's super cool. Like a whole new control, big thing. It was an experimentation for a long time. People have talked about it, but it's in the box, which is crazy. And people think that they come to me and say, James, like, isn't native? Like you've been preaching for 12 years, the Xamarin and now .NET MAUI story. I just got to say, like, listen, I am a native app developer. I'm not a web developer. However, there are many web developers and many applications that blend these technologies together. And I love that the MAUI development team and PM team are enabling these new scenarios because there are tons of Blazor developers and web developers that are like, wouldn't it be cool to use all my .NET stuff and also use this web view stuff and like put it into this application? Cool, now you can do it.
And to be blunt, like it's 2024. Like sometimes you have to talk to a web app. You don't have a choice. There's no API. Like I wrote an app and I had to present probably a good eighth of the UI of that app as a web view because I had zero other choice. I was using someone else's service, and it was either that or I start scraping HTML and doing much even nastier things. It's 2024. We have to integrate. We all have to get along.
Well, and what's funny is I was at VS Live, like I said, last week or 2 weeks ago now, if you're listening to this, and someone asked me like, hey, we have like these issues with like collection view and like, I don't know, it's not working well, blah, blah. Like, what should we do? Now, I'll tell you there's an update in this release to check out, but I was like, oh, we'll just use a Blazor web view and use the quick grid. Just use the web control. No. I go, because here's the thing is
okay. After all I said, that still was a little knife through my heart.
so here's the thing is these are a lot of like internal applications. So it's not like, out there, but a lot of times people are like looking to display like a 10,000 rows of data,
I know.
like
I get
really
it.
complexly. Like the nice thing is
Yep.
that thing has paging built in. It's a standard web control
Mm-hmm.
and it's a grid. That's what they want. It's what the people want. And it's not standardized on the platforms and they want to bring it in. So I just
No.
use quick grid. Just do it. And they're
No.
like, oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, just do it. Now, that being said, the dotnet MAUI team apparently have rewritten the entire handler for both
Good.
collection view and carousel view on iOS and Mac using new UI collection view APIs, which is cool.
About time. um, no shade, no limit. I keep saying that. Collection View's gone through some hard times. Let's just say that. In the early days, and this is partly Apple's fault. Apple has radically changed how Collection View works over the years. It used to be tables, list views were kind of where all the craziness was, and then collection views just became this monster of a thing. I forget when it was, somewhere around iOS 10 or 11, but it just became huge, the things it was capable of, and they wanted you to put everything in a collection view. Add those changes to maybe a few design decisions were a little incorrect in the early days of the collection view handlers. This is well overdue. I'm very excited for it. I have to say, just a few minutes ago when you were talking about like native UIs and everything, I did want to interject, but I realized you were contrasting native UIs with web UIs. In my mind, I contrast native UIs with MAUI UIs because it is it's a different API and things can present slightly differently and things like that. But the point I wanted to make was one of the beauties of Xamarin Forms and now MAUI is you don't like how a control renders, you can make your own native renderer for that control and still use like the cohesive app architecture of MAUI and everything. But then I hate to say it, but I used to always re-implement the collection view handlers because I would have very specific needs. Like I have the library browser for iCircuit, which I want to page through literally 10,000 visually rich icons that are generated on demand. That's a weird use case. It's not a use case collection view was exactly designed for, and so I was running into trouble. But the good news is I could just override the handler, and I just made my own collection view. I kept all the APIs identical, and I copy-pasted over that collection view, and then I just made the changes I needed to make it work the way I wanted it to. Anyway, that was a long way to say, glad there is an opt-in. You got to opt into the new handler, but that's cool that... they're going for a version 2 on that one, and it's a little well overdue.
I like it. And you're right. This to opt in, it's literally, hey, for collection view, use this new handler. Like, and as if you were doing it yourself, which is really cool to see. Yeah. Really nice.
Yeah. I love that. Pro tip, anyone out there, if any of the MAUI views isn't doing what you're wanting, it's just override the native view. It's usually one function you have to override to get it to work the way you want.
It's wild. Another new control, title bar. This is neat. Title bar, this is a community contribution. So it's available. So there's two parts of this that I think are neat. One is there's just a new control called title bar. And think of it as a nav bar, but navigation bar was already taken. I think navigation page or whatever.
Yeah.
But title bar, it's a thing up top, like on the page, if you're on your Mac or Windows application. But it has like, an icon, a title, it has some information, as maybe as a search bar, it has like some trailing information, it has like, all this stuff in it. So now there's just like a standard navigation bar. The cool part is this title bar can be used in any application. So you can use it on iOS, you could use it on Mac, you could put it anywhere. So you could use it in any app. But if you use it on Windows and soon on Mac Catalyst, it will replace that top bar, like the top bar that's just kind of generic with like the minimize, maximize, exit button. You can override the content that's in there, which again, to your point, like you're contrasting the native APIs versus the MAUI APIs. And this is cool that they've extended window to have a title bar property that you can put a title bar inside of, or you can just put your title bar anywhere in your application, which is kind of cool. If you want a title bar in the middle of your page, just slap it right in the middle of the page, and that's totally fine.
This is a big deal because to make a decent Mac app, and these days a decent iPad app, it's all in what Apple calls the toolbar now, the toolbar at the top of the app, but it's the same thing, the title bar, whatever. It's the place the buttons go and your search forms and all the funny stuff. If you look at modern Mac and iOS apps, everything's put up there. It's like
Yeah.
the new tab bar. it's Apple is throwing so much stuff up there that half of the time they have to put the little ellipsis in there because they all don't fit in there. They're
Yeah.
putting so much junk up there. So put all your junk up there. No, don't put junk up there. You put the buttons that people are clicking all the time, and you put those up there, and life is going to be good. I've been really excited for this because every single one of my iOS apps have iOS and macOS apps have a huge chunk of file just managing the toolbar because it just
Yeah.
wasn't something supported by MAUI. So awesome.
It's in
I don't want to
there.
say long overdue, but a little overdue. Great to have it.
Yeah. It's pretty cool that it's just like in there and like ready to go. Which is nice. A great community contribution. I'm excited to see it come to Mac. Like in Mac, you actually have to like change some info PILA stuff to get stuff up there, I think. So, and in the PR, you can see that the work is almost done, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, Mac has gone through a few UI changes over the years, and you have to make a few decisions on how you want the toolbar to integrate with everything. But it's really not that bad. And honestly, the changes are very subtle. James, I'm going to take you out of whatever order you are about to go in next because I saw an item on this list that's freaking me out, and I need an explanation out of you. You ready?
Okay.
Main page is obsolete.
Ooh.
What?
Okay,
What controversy?
Controversy.
Main page. Ooh. For a little context out there, if you're not a Xamarin Forms or MAUI developer, main page was like, you create an app, you give it a main page, and that's the page that shows up when the app loads. Life was simple. I'm assuming it's all been subsumed by the shell life and other application stuff, or Windows stuff. What's happened? Is it shell stuff or Windows stuff replacing my main page?
It's Windows stuff that's replacing it. So they are now driving into a world in which window is the main thing to do.
Yeah.
There is already a create window, and I think in the new templates you'll see the main page go away. It's not going to be removed, but now you will do create window. You will in the window put an app shell, and you'll be off to the races. And the nice thing about Windows and multi-window support is if you decide to do multi-window support, that is supported on Mac and iOS and of course Windows to do multi-windows. This is going to be a big change. This is probably going to be the biggest change. This means also, if you're doing if you're calling app.main, app.current.main page or whatever to do window pop-ups and dialogues, that will probably continue to work. But you most likely will want to actually find the window that it's on and get the page that is displayed on the window. It seems like a big change, but I'm not 100% sure if it is or not. You know what I mean?
I have to admit, I was always a main page fan. I always resisted shell, but these days every template uses shell. The shell has become the dominant way to structure your app, and they got me. They wore me down over years and years of file new project. And I'm like, fine, I'll shell. I don't have a main page, but you still mark a main page in the shell. So it's confusing. But I think, so the whole thing is, I think the standard template is you use the same shell for every new window, but I think there is a way to also override window types and get different shells in different windows. It's honestly weird. Because the iPhone doesn't support multi-window still. The iPad supports it poorly, and the iMac supports it completely differently than the iPad. So life is a little bit weird in the multi-window life, but I embrace change. I'm here for it, and I can't wait to deal with all the bugs from multi-windows and restoration. Everyone, please check how your app restores. It's weird. It's really weird with multi-window.
Yeah. Do it. Get it done. Yeah. I think besides that, what else is in here? If I'm looking at the list of stuff, that one's a big one. I think there's a bunch of other small things that are like, nice things to do. But the biggest one at the very, very end is a brand new CLI command Frank Krueger.
Oh, I missed
It's
that. Okay.
it's called Xcode Sync.
This I hope we weren't going to skip over. Good, this is important because Xcode Sync, man. Do you want to get into why we need Xcode Sync? Does everyone
I
know?
Okay, so well, let's talk about why you would need Xcode first. Like, what would be the rationale that you would need Xcode, Frank?
Xcode is needed whenever you're doing anything that requires a storyboard,
Mm-hmm.
roughly. I think that's, or if you're writing an extension sometimes, because those two can go hand in hand. Extensions can sometimes require very specific storyboards and things like that. And although there were versions of Visual Studio for Mac that could handle storyboards, it was never perfect. And so there have been a lot of times. Let me take one more step back. If you're doing straight up AppKit development with .NET. I'm not talking about MAUI. I'm talking about
Yeah.
.NET 8.0 hyphen Mac OS, like real Mac development. You still need to do a lot of your UI in their UI designer storyboard files. So in a storyboard, you need to link up your events and your properties. There's a data binding. There's events, commands, however you want to think of them, and there's data binding, and you need to do that. Otherwise, you end up writing a lot of terrible UI code. I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst. So, in order to express these bindings, you get to do the control drag operation between all sorts of fun
Yeah.
things. It's the best part of using Xcode. I remember training people how to do control drag, and 1 out of 10 people would get it. it was
Yeah.
it's the worst, but once you get it, it's fine. But getting it is horrendous. So we would often we needed an Xcode sync so that we could take our data models from our .NET projects, express them in a way that Xcode could understand, so that we could do our data binding and our event triggering from Xcode storyboards and nibs and zips back in the old days. I'm sure there's other reasons we want Xcode, but that's the big one.
Yeah, and if you're doing non dot, if you are doing .NET MAUI development, you might have those asset packs. You might have a few other
Asset
like
packs.
info p lists, right? Things like that. And yet now there's a CLI where you can sync both ways. So you can say, hey, like I want to sync into Xcode, and I want to sync out of Xcode, basically, and synchronize those things back and forth, which is pretty neat, actually.
No, it's super neat because, I mean, this has been there since Xamarin 1.0, but it
Yeah.
wasn't ever really exposed to developers. Like, they didn't really want you doing this manually. It was supposed to be an IDE feature, like, it was supposed to be automatic. It's just a part of the development process. So it's actually kind of wild that after all these years, it's become actually a developer thing, documented. You can actually just run this stuff yourself. Honestly, I don't see myself doing it. I hope
Yeah.
not to. But one benefit, if you are using not an IDE, but a text editor or something like Visual Studio Code, you might run into funny things where maybe the extension isn't behaving or something, and you want to have this in a script to do or something like that.
Mm.
I hope to never use it, but I also at the same time think it's pretty cool that they made this a developer feature and not just an IDE feature.
Yeah. I like it. All right. Well, check it out. Donna Maui, Donna 9, Preview 7, RCs, I'm sure, hopefully coming soon, which is super duper rad. That's all I got for mine. What do you got for yours,
Oh,
Frank?
James, well, you're living this .NET 9 world, and I'm still back here in .NET 8. Hi from the
What?
past.
Wow.
But from the
Wow.
past, I'm not sure if you're aware of this little thing, and I don't think we can cover it all in this episode, so this might just be
Okay.
a little bit of a tease for the next
Teaser.
episode. There's a new way, James. I don't think you know about this because you totally didn't tell me about this last week.
Yeah.
There is a new way to create bindings in .NET for native
Yeah.
libraries.
Uh-huh.
And I have read the blogs. I have read the Getting Started. I have read the Microsoft Learn. I have highlighted. I have taken critical notes. I have done sample projects. I am ready to talk about bindings, and that will be our teaser for next week, I think, or something like
I
that.
like it. This is pretty cool. Yes, the native library interop
Sure.
is That's what it's called.
NLI. NLI
Is
between friends.
is very, very, very cool. So I actually recently, last week on you, it's not out yet when you and I are recording, but next week,
Okay.
I had Rachel on the Down in My podcast, and she was talking about accessibility, but then we also recorded a video, which I think then I guess would be out on the 20th. So I guess tomorrow or whenever you listen on August 20th on the Down at YouTube, there's a whole video on native library interop, aka slim bindings, aka a new way of doing bindings with .NET MAUI for libraries, but also not libraries, like just Swift code as well. Like you could just invoke Swift APIs as well. You don't have to actually have like a library to bind. It could just be like the default template just says you pass it a string and then it concatenates on like, an
whatever.
API. So you can call it. But anyways, they're bindings. I'm just saying. So, okay, high level, we'll do a deep dive next week. But what's your high level teaser thoughts, Frank Krueger? Because you printed off Rachel's blog post, which I think is great.
Oh yeah,
and
I print everything. I print every email I get. Every text message I get, I print. High level review. This is a great improvement to the existing system. I don't think it's revolutionary, which is good because I can apply all my existing knowledge to all this stuff. What they did was removed probably the most painful step of all of it, which is managing the native projects and actually linking in the ugly binary and making all that stuff work. And they throw in a bunch of code generation stuff. So I would say what this release really is a quality of life improvement. Like all the technologies kind of existed before, but now they're all just gathered into one happy place, and you can just create from one happy template, one happy binding project, and then you can go on being a happy dev. I think that's what it's all about.
I like that. Yeah, it's pretty nice. We'll deep dive through it next week. So if you're interested in that, tune into the pod, subscribe, tell all your friends. Anything else you got, Frank, before you dip out of here?
No, I am ready to give Apple another 30%. I'm trying to think of a digital good so I can give Apple some more money.
Hey, giving Apple some money, that's a good day. All right. I'm going to go become a Patreon subscriber to all my favorite Patrons. Check us out on the internet, youtube.com/@mergeconflict.fm if you're interested in seeing our beautiful faces every single week and listening to us. You can also check out our Patreon, patreon.com/mergeconflict.fm. Frank gets half that money. I get half that money, and we continue this pod. It helps our hosting fees on our friends at Zencast, who help produce this podcast, and Fireside FM, who are our podcast hosts. You can see us on the internet. I'm not really as much on the internet. I'm on LinkedIn. I think you're on you're somewhere. Where are you at, Frank, on the internet?
I'm still rocking what's the website formerly known as Twitter. That one.
The W one.
Yeah.
Y. Z. Q.
X. Yeah, something like that.
Frank's on the X. We're on the GitHubs. We're on the LinkedIn's. We're on the Mastodons. We're on the I'm kind of on the Mastodons, I guess.
I'm on the Mastodon community because that's where the Apple dev community all ran off to. So if you want to be a part of the Apple dev community, you're on Mastodon.
Bam. Check us out. Where else should we be? Let us know. And right into the show. Well, thanks, Franks. I really appreciate podcasting with you this week. This is really fun.
I enjoy podcasting with you too, and this week included, I believe.
My stepmom was in visiting, and she's like, "What's that big microphone for? Like, what do you use that for?" And
the bigger the personality, the bigger the mic.
And I was like, "Oh yeah, I podcast and I do videos, and I also just like Teams calls." And she's like, "Oh, like, how often do you podcast?" Like, "Oh, I used to podcast a lot. Now I do like once a week. It's great because I get to catch up with Frank. It's like it's like calling someone every week, And I was like, we've been doing it for like 8.5 years. And she's like, "Oh my god!" And I was like, "Yeah, we have like 400 and such." What? What a weird! What a bunch of weirdos! I'm pretty sure she thought we were like super weird, but I appreciate the weirdness of podcasting. And she's like, "What do you talk about?" I was like, Heck if I know. I have no idea. I've literally no idea what we talk about ever, basically.
Well, especially not in the summer when the tech world is asleep and on vacation to France.
All right, people. Have a great one. Thank you for watching. This is going to do it for this week's Merge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Magno, and
I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.